Welcome to part 2 of every 20th century UK Prime Minister's biggest achievement. In the last video we left off with our good friend Winston Churchill. And before we dive into Winston Churchill's biggest achievement, you'll never guess what it is by the way, we are going to say please subscribe to Collective Histories. Your subscription matters to us, it's very important, and it ensures that we are doing something right and that the channel continues to grow and that we can continue providing you this kind of content. So, Winston Churchill, well, it's pretty obvious. His biggest achievement was his leadership and the eventual victory of Britain and the Allies during the Second World War. Churchill's leadership as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1940 to 1945, aka his first term, particularly during the early years of World War II, is widely regarded as one of his greatest achievements. I mean, his speeches, including the famous "We shall fight them with growing confidence and strength in the air" address, inspired the British people and the Allied forces during the darkest days of the war, especially Britain, which was taking heavy beatings from Germany and the Air Force, the Luftwaffe at the time. His resolute stance against Nazi Germany played a crucial role in maintaining morale and determination. Churchill was also a vocal critic of appeasement policies before the war, and when he became Prime Minister in 1940, he steadfastly refused to negotiate with Hitler. Instead, he rallied the British people and committed to fighting until victory was achieved. I mean, it's why he's nicknamed the British Bulldog. He wanted a fight with Germany. He always believed that Hitler could not be appeased and that war was inevitable. So whereas we included in the last video that Neville Chamberlain's greatest achievement was the policy of appeasement, while also his worst mistake, it's complicated, okay? It was clear that Churchill was probably the right one on this topic, and war was inevitable and it needed to happen. Churchill was on the right side of history because he won the war, and yeah, this is easily his greatest achievement. I don't care if people try and tell you that his Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953 was his greatest achievement. I'm sorry, it's not, okay? World War II kind of overshadows that. Next, we have Clement Atley. For Clement Atley, who was Labour Prime Minister between 1945 and 1951, his biggest achievement is easily his post-World War II reforms, and this included the nationalisation of industries. So one of the most significant policy initiatives under Atley's leadership was the nationalisation of key industries. The Labour government nationalised industries such as coal mining, railways, and the Bank of England, aiming to ensure public ownership and control over key sectors of the economy. Most notably, and probably his single biggest achievement, though not entirely attributed to him, as Nye Bevan was the real mastermind behind it, Atley's government is perhaps best known for the establishment of the National Health Service, or the NHS, in 1948, and the NHS aimed to provide universal healthcare free at the point of use, a principle that remains a cornerstone of the British healthcare system and is one of the most important aspects of the UK even today. I mean, the parties are still arguing over whether it should be free, whether it shouldn't be free, and funding and so forth. It remains a very important cornerstone of UK discourse, and it's one of our most treasured institutions, no doubt. And then there was the welfare state and social security. So Atley's government implemented a broad range of social welfare programs, including the expansion of social security benefits, the creation of the welfare state, and the introduction of measures to address poverty and unemployment. The post-war period also saw significant educational reforms, including the raising of the school leaving age and the development of a more accessible and inclusive education system. There was also decolonisation. Atley's government oversaw the process of decolonisation, which granted independence to India in 1947, and whereas his biggest mistake is undoubtedly the partitioning of India, granting Indian independence was a big thing, and it's attributed to Atley and his government mostly. And Atley's government engaged in economic planning, seeking to address the challenges of post-war reconstruction and to promote economic stability and growth. He also played a role in the establishment of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, in 1949, which contributed to the collective defense of Western democracies during the Cold War. So Atley's government did a lot, and the entire 1945 Labour Manifesto would be his greatest achievement, but if I'm singling one out, it's probably the NHS. So that is Clement Atley. Next, we have Anthony Eden. Anthony Eden was Prime Minister during a very troublesome time between 6th of April 1955 and 9th of January 1957, and his entire political legacy is tarnished, completely tarnished, by the Suez Canal crisis, and because of that, there's really nothing which stands out as being a great achievement that he did while the Prime Minister. So I really don't know what to do for him. In terms of personal achievement, he won the Military Cross and became the youngest brigade major in British Army. Yeah, that's it. He won the Military Cross by saving a soldier's life during the First World War, and that's really all I can give him because his time as Prime Minister is really overshadowed by the Suez Canal crisis. And I've looked, I've researched, I can't find anything special. So yeah, sorry Anthony Eden, that's just kind of where you are, my friend. Next we have Harold McMillan, who was Prime Minister between 1957 and 1963. And for me, he's not one of my favorite Prime Ministers, but he has a significant achievement in the form of the Wind of Change speech.
The wind of change is blowing through this continent. And whether we like it or not, this growth of national consciousness is a political fact. And we must all accept it as a fact.
So the Wind of Change speech was delivered on February the 3rd, 1960 during a visit to Cape Town, South Africa, and this speech is widely considered a pivotal moment in the history of British colonial history and specifically the decolonization process. So in the late 1950s and early 1960s, many African nations were gaining independence from colonial rule. This is well known. The process of decolonization was underway, reflecting a changing global attitude towards imperialism and the right to self-determination. And Macmillan acknowledged this. His speech acknowledged the profound social, political, and economic changes taking place in Africa. He recognized a wind of change blowing across the continent, symbolizing the unstoppable force of African nations seeking independence and self-governance. He emphasized the British government's commitment to the principle of self-determination for African nations. He declared that the United Kingdom would not stand in the way of African countries choosing their own destinies and governments. While recognizing the inevitable shift towards African self-rule, he also highlighted that the British Empire would continue to have a role in the world. He envisaged a commonwealth of nations where former colonies could maintain close ties with Britain while enjoying independence too. And the Wind of Change speech had a profound impact on international perceptions of British colonial policy. It marked a departure from the traditional stance of imperial dominance and signaled a recognition of the legitimacy of African aspirations for independence. So yeah, for me this is his biggest achievement and it's a good one, so well done Harold McMillan. Next we have Alec DouglasHome, who was Prime Minister between 18th October 1963 and the 16th October 1964, and he didn't have much time to do much. In fact, he spent most of this time as Prime Minister just trying to continue with the policies of the former government under Harold McMillan, which had collapsed under the weight of government scandal and sleaze, and DouglasHome failed to really impose himself on the government. He didn't achieve anything of note, and it's hard to sum up what would be his biggest achievement. And due to the government being in such severe decline at this time, and the Conservative Party itself being torn apart by scandal and factionalism, I'm going to put his biggest achievement as the general election defeat in 1964. And this is because he only lost by a very slim margin despite all of the scandal, and despite Harold Wilson coming up as a younger, more modern opposition. So I'd say this was DouglasHome's best achievement, and I would go so far as to say he did pretty well in the election considering everything that was going on. So this is the only thing I can give him, I'm afraid. Sorry, DouglasHome. Next we have Harold Wilson, who was Prime Minister on two occasions, the first being between 1964 and 1970, and the second being between 1974 and 1976. And there are many achievements which he achieved during this time, and it's kind of difficult to place one. I mean, he introduced the Open University, which was a significant initiative under Wilson's leadership, and it aimed to democratize education and make higher education more accessible to a broader segment of the population. He expanded educational opportunities, such as the Open University in 1969, and it provided distance learning and higher education opportunities to a wide range of people, including those who did not have traditional access to university education. There were social and economic reforms. These reforms aimed to modernize the British economy and society. The government invested in education, introduced measures to improve social welfare, and pursued policies to boost technological advancement. Perhaps most notably, in 1967, Wilson's government took steps to decriminalize homosexuality in England and Wales with the passing of the Sexual Offences Act. And this was a significant social reform that contributed to the advancement of LGBTQ plus rights in the UK. So yeah, I'm willing to use most of the education reforms as his biggest achievement, or with the decriminalization of homosexuality in there too. There are many things he did very well while Prime Minister, and I'm willing to go with education reform as his biggest achievement. Next we have Edward Heath, or Ted Heath, and he was Prime Minister between 1970 and 1974. And for me, his biggest achievement, and this will be controversial to some, his biggest achievement was the the successful negotiation and entry of the United Kingdom into the European Economic Commission, or the EEC, in 1973. This marked a major step towards European integration and had long-lasting implications for the UK's relationship with the European Union. And I think it actually modernized the UK in many ways. It improved its reputation. Before we joined this, we were nicknamed the sick man of Europe, for crying out loud. So I think this was a good thing. He did a couple other good things too. I mean, he introduced various social policies and included the establishment of the Department of the Environment and the creation of conservation areas. I mean, it's the Conservative Party. They should be conservating the environment. So yeah, I'm willing to suggest that his biggest achievement was the EEC, or the UK's successful negotiation into the EEC. Next we have James Callaghan, who was Prime Minister between 1976 and 1979, and he's probably one of my less favourite Prime Ministers, if I'm being completely honest with you. And it's hard to think of something great that he did. He was, through no fault of his own, was a Prime Minister during a very tough time economically for the UK. And it's kind of difficult to pick one. I'm going to go with... See, normally in this situation, I would go for the cop-out answer and say that he handled the economy and the UK well during a tough and turbulent time, but it was very bad. We know about the winters of discontent. That was what we put as his biggest mistake in the last video. And yeah, I'm going to go with the fact that he held the 4 great offices of state. He's the only politician to have done so. He served as Chancellor, as Home Secretary, as Foreign Secretary, and as Prime Minister. So I'm going to give this as his biggest achievement. I mean, he tried to make efforts towards devolution for Wales and Scotland. There was the Scotland Act in 1978 and the Wales Act in 1978. So as a Welsh person, I like this, but it didn't even achieve full devolution. So yeah, I'm going to go that he held the 4 great offices of state. And next we have Margaret Thatcher, but we don't really, because we're going to leave Margaret Thatcher until the next part of this video, part 3, which will be here on Monday. So in the meantime, you can subscribe to us for more. We have 3 videos a week currently. We have 7 short videos a week. It's a daily On This Day in History video. So please check it out and subscribe. And then you can follow us on facebook.com/Collective Histories page. And if that's not enough, you can follow us on Instagram at instagram.com/The Collective Histories. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Collective Histo. And if you really want to support us and go the extra mile, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Collective Histories. I'm very thirsty after recording these videos, so please fund my coffee addiction, I beg. And yeah, that's everything. I will wish you all a lovely weekend, and we'll see you on Monday when we'll begin with Margaret Thatcher and her biggest achievement. And I can assure you it's going to be difficult for me to choose one, because if you haven't guessed already, I'm not a big fan of Margaret Thatcher. So yeah, we'll see you on Monday for the next video, and until then, take care, be safe, and watch out for James Callaghan. Okay, goodbye!